Hey guys, welcome to another book review. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about another book that was just a fun random find. It combined two of my favorite things, history and wine. So had to buy it, glad I did. So I will be sharing with you guys the book Wine and War, the French, the Nazis, and the Battle for France's Greatest Treasure. They're talking about the wine trade, okay? In this book, that is France's greatest treasure. So if I had to describe it as a movie, just picture the Monuments Men movie, like, the World War II story that had George Clooney, and like his group was all about saving the art and stuff. So basically, like, it's the French trying to save all of their wine and get it back because the Nazis took the vast majority of it. So this talks a lot about the wine trade coming out of World War I, what they're trying to do to get back their vineyards, keep them healthy, because World War I really messed up their crops for quite some time. And the harvests weren't incredibly good, or they had to replant a lot of their vines because of damage from the wars. So this, it talks a lot about how World War I kind of messed up the trade for a little bit, and they're just starting to get back into the groove of things. They're just starting to get in some really good optimism about their wine coming back and, the harvest being really good and just creating some very, very good wines. And then World War II shows up. So, shit. It also talks about how there was fear in the countryside amongst the winemakers. Like, once World War II was declared, they were like, we need to go hide all the wine. So you got guys burying bottles of wine in their garden. One gentleman built a whole new wall in his wine cave. I mean, granted, they weren't just hiding wine. Some of the French were hiding cars. Like, they were doing everything they could just in the hope that not every possession of theirs was going to get taken by the Nazis. Because basically Hitler said, whatever France has in abundance, just take it. Just anything in abundance, you take it. Fun fact, Hitler didn't drink. But other Nazis did, and man, they enjoyed taking some of that wine and having some of that wine. Also, it kind of talks about how some of the French were friends with some of the Germans. They share a border, guys. And so some of that countryside, these people had been working together. They had been trading wines together, doing business together. And now suddenly that person is your enemy, and they're supposed to come fight you for your assets and property and all of that. So it talks about how a lot of people had to walk a very fine line, and everything got a lot more terrifying after World War II was declared, because you couldn't say anymore, yeah, this is my friend, they happen to be German, or vice versa. You couldn't really do that. They talk a lot about the different traditions in winemaking, which I also think is pretty fascinating, like the very old school traditions. So during World War II in France, obviously, if you were trying to keep your vines alive and healthy, there were certain things that you needed, certain supplies, chemicals. They didn't have it. One of the French, I think he's like a teenager at the time, he tries to make the chemical. He's briefly successful, but then an air raid comes and he's worried about the Germans finding it, so then he has to like abandon it, right? He can't make the chemical anymore. So it's just, there's all kinds of like interesting personal stories in this book. The authors interviewed a lot of people that were alive during the time, people that were willing to share their experiences, or if they themselves were not alive, it was another younger relative who is still alive sharing the story. So it's very informative. It talks a lot about French culture, the history of their winemaking. Also talks about the pride that they have in this product and how much they love it, because it's like ingrained within them, this love of their land, this love of the grapes, this, you know, great care and tradition of winemaking. So it's really cool because the passion that these people have for making their wine just seems to seep off the page. And I have to say, that's very hard to do when you're a writer. So props to the authors. There are a couple funny stories in here as well. There are some depressing ones. It's a book about World War II. You're gonna run into some depressing stuff. Sorry. But I have to say, this is very informative. It gives you a lot of cool personal stories that you just don't get to read about in history books. And I really hope you guys will consider reading this book, just because it's so interesting to hear about this time period and to learn more about this drink that pretty much everyone all over the world seems to enjoy. Granted, I know every country makes like their own wine or whatever, but to hear and read about, you know, France's wine trade during this time, for me it was just very enlightening, because it's not something, it's not a book that I ever thought I would get to read, and just to know that it's a lot of personal stories from people that were alive during the time is pretty cool. So I hope you guys will consider purchasing this, reading this book, and if you do, I really hope you enjoy it as much as I did, because I gotta say, this is one of my favorite history books. I use that term kind of loosely, but it technically, I would say it's like a history book. But anyway, till next time.